It began with a phone call. Dr. Eleanor Vance, a psychologist specializing in trauma, was summoned to consult on an abandoned asylum project. The Crenshaw Institute, long shuttered after a fire in the 1970s, had been sold to developers who hoped to turn it into luxury apartments. But during renovations, workers discovered a hidden wing, its existence unrecorded and sealed off for decades. Inside the forgotten wards, they found signs of hasty abandonment, overturned chairs, charts scattered across the floor, and the overwhelming stench of decay. Even more disturbing, strange symbols were scrawled on the walls, etched deep into the stone, and a collection of patient belongings lay untouched, as if waiting for their owners to return. Even more disturbing, strange symbols were scrawled on the walls, etched deep into the stone, and a collection of patient belongings lay untouched, as if waiting for their owners to return. Reluctant, but intrigued, Eleanor agreed, believing the story of the asylum closure might reveal fascinating insights into mental health story, or at least offer material for her upcoming book. Eleanor arrived at Kershaw on a rainy autumn morning. The asylum loomed ahead like corpse in the fog, skeletal, grey, and lifeless. The poor man, a grizzled man named Carter, greeted her with a flashlight and a warning. Eleanor arrived at Kershaw on a rainy autumn morning. The asylum loomed ahead like a corpse in the fog, skeletal, grey, and lifeless. The foreman, a grizzled man named Carter, greeted her with a flashlight and a warning. "You'll want to get in and out," he said. "Workers refuse to go past the main hall anymore. Say they hear voices in the sealed wing." Brushing off the warning, Eleanor entered the forgotten wards. A palpable chill settled over her as she crossed the threshold. The air felt heavier, like stepping into a mausoleum. Her footsteps echoed down empty corridors lined with peeling paint and rusted fixtures. In one room, Eleanor found a patient file labeled Subject 6, describing a young woman named Lydia Gray. Lydia had been institutionalized for claiming she could communicate with the dead. Her treatment notes grew increasingly erratic, detailing unexplained phenomena, objects moving on their own, shadows that defied light. The final entry simply read, "Do not enter room 305. Curious, Eleanor sought out room 305. Its door was reinforced with chains, but one hung loose, its padlock broken. Against her better judgment, she stepped inside. The room was nearly empty, save for a metal cot and a child's doll seated upright in the corner, its painted eyes wide and unnerving. On the walls, the same symbols reappeared, scratched into the plaster, glowing faintly in the dim light. As Eleanor examined the symbols, she heard a whisper, a woman's voice, faint but clear. "Help us." Spinning round, Eleanor found no one there, but the doll had moved. It now lay on its side, facing the door. Her rational mind tried to explain it away. A draft, her own imagination. Yet the whispers grew louder as she lingered, morphing into guttural chants that seemed to reverberate inside her skull. She fled the room, but the sound followed her, growing more insistent. Eleanor stumbled back into the main corridor, her heart pounding. She leaned against the wall to steady herself, forcing slow, deliberate breath. The whispers faded, but her unease only deepened. Determined to rationalize what had happened, she pulled out her recorder and began dictating her thoughts. Unusual acoustics in the building, likely a trick of the wind or residual sound distortion. Must investigate further. Her voice trembled, betraying her forced calm. She clanked back toward room 305. The door now stood slightly ajar, though she was certain she'd closed it behind her. Before she could process this, the sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor, heavy and deliberate. They approached from the shadows ahead. Eleanor froze, her flashlight trembling in her hand. "Hello?" she called out. Her voice echoed but received no response. The footsteps ceased. Then, in the silence, she heard something worse, the faint, wet sound of breathing. She turned and hurried back toward the entrance, but the corridor seemed longer than before. The walls, once lined with peeling paint, now bore the same eerie symbols she'd seen in room 305. The air thickened, suffocating her with every step. When she finally reached the lobby, Carter was gone. The front door stood wide open, rain pouring in. Relief washed over her as she bolted outside, gasping for air. Determined to understand the asylum's history, Eleanor dug into local archives. She discovered the hidden wing was used for special patients believed to be conduits for the supernatural. Among them was Lydia Crane, the sole survivor of the fire that destroyed Cronshaw. A faded photograph confirmed the chilling connection. Lydia as a child holding the same doll Eleanor had been seen in room 305. Eleanor couldn't resist the pull of the asylum and returned at night. The air inside was suffocating, and her flashlight flickered as if the building itself were alive. She followed the whispers to an old surveillance room. On a monitor, she saw room 305. The doll sat on the bed, and behind it, a shadowy figure loomed, its form shifting unnaturally. As the screen cut to static, the whispers grew louder. "She's waiting." Eleanor entered room 305. The walls warped around her, and Lydia Crane appeared, her ghostly form flickering like a weak flame. "You shouldn't have come," Lydia said. "It won't let you leave." Before Eleanor could react, the shadows in the room formed into a massive, multi-limbed entity. Its whispers became deafening as it swallowed Lydia, leaving only ash, The entity turned toward Eleanor, consuming her in darkness. Days later, workers found Eleanor's belongings abandoned, but there was no sign of her. In room 305, the doll sat upright on the bed, its cracked face bearing a faint resemblance to Eleanor's. The asylum remained silent, waiting patiently for its next victim.